So in this video, we're going to look at solving equations, and we're going to look at it from a clothesline perspective. So if I told you that x plus 4 was at 7, where do you think we would then put x? So would x have to be bigger than x plus 4, or would x be smaller than x plus 4? Hopefully you're thinking that x would have to be smaller than the answer to x plus 4, because x plus 4 means we're taking x and we're adding 4 to it, which means if I wanted to figure out where x was, what I'd really have to do then is I'd have to take away 4 to get to where x would be, which in this case will be 3. So let's look at another one. If x plus 9 was sitting at 4, where would x be? Again, the first thing you need to think about is, would x be smaller or bigger than 4? Hopefully you're thinking that x would have to be smaller than 4, because if x plus 9 is 4, then x has to be smaller than that. How do we figure out where x is going to go? Well, let's take away 4. 1, 2, 3, 9. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we'll end up with x being at -5. Let's look at another one. Now this one has subtraction, so we have to think about it for a second. If x minus 3 is -4, where would x be? Would x be bigger than that answer, or would x be smaller than that answer? Again, hopefully in your head you're thinking, I think x needs to be bigger than whatever x take away 3 might be, right? Think about that. If I knew what x was and I took 3 away from that, that has to be smaller than x. So x would have to be bigger than x minus 3. How am I going to figure out where x is? I'm just going to add 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to be at -1. Let's look at this one. If x minus 7 is -1, where would x be? So again, hopefully you're thinking, x has to be 7 bigger than where x minus 7 is. So I'm going to then have to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to make it 7 bigger, and I will end up at 6. This is called a double clothesline, and it helps us to visualize whether we're getting bigger or smaller with the answer. So I just want to go back for a second. Notice that if x plus 4 was something, how did we get x? We subtracted. We subtracted to get x. And as an equation, if I wrote that out, x plus 4 equals 7, how would I properly show my work? I would subtract 4 from both sides, because that's how I keep my equation balanced, and I would end up with x equals 3, which is exactly where I ended up on my number line. Let's look at this one here. X plus 9 equals 4. How did I solve for x? I had to take 9 away from both sides to keep it balanced, and I end up with -5. What about this one? X minus 3 is -4. How did I figure out where x was going to be? Well, x was bigger than x minus 3, so I needed to add 3 to both sides to keep things balanced, and I would get an answer of -1. Let's look at this one. X minus 7 was -1. How did I get x? I needed to add 7 to both sides. I got 6. So let's look at a few more. If x plus 7 is -2, where would x be? So again, is x going to be bigger than x plus 7 or smaller than x plus 7? Hopefully you realize that x is going to be smaller than x plus 7. Oops. And how many smaller? It's going to be 9 smaller. 7 smaller. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You'll end up at -9. And again, if I wrote that out, how would I solve? I'd have to subtract 7 from both sides, and I end up with -9. If x minus 6 was 4, where would x be? So is x going to be bigger than x minus 6? Or is it going to be smaller than x minus 6? And hopefully you realize that x would have to be bigger than x minus 6. And how much bigger? It's going to have to be 6 bigger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You'll end up with 10. Again, if I wrote that out, x minus 6 is 4. I would need to add 6 to solve for x. And I do that on both sides. And I get x equals 10. Let's look at a couple more that are a little bit trickier. So this one says -x minus 3. So I've added an extra box here for -x. So where would -x end up? Hopefully you realize that -x would have to be bigger than -x take away 3. So it's going to be 3 bigger. So we're going to end up at 1, 2, 3. We'll end up at -1. That's what -x is. What would positive x be? Positive x then would be 1, because they're opposites. If -x, let me just write that, if -x were -1, then positive x would have to be +1. They're opposites of one another. Likewise, -x plus 2. If -x plus 2 is 8, where would -x be? So again, would it be bigger? Would it be smaller? Hopefully you realize it needs to be 2 smaller than -x plus 2. So that's going to end up at 6. So they're going to overlap a little bit there. So again, if -x is 6, where would x be? X is going to have to be the opposite, or -x. Let me write that out. If -x is 6, then positive x would have to be -6. They're opposites of one another. Hopefully that helped you to visualize solving simple equations. And really all we're doing is, if something says, if something said x plus something, how do you solve for it? You subtract. You're doing the opposite operation. But remember, you're doing it to both sides to keep the equation balanced. And then likewise, if something says subtract, how do you solve for x? You would add to both sides to keep the equation balanced. And hopefully this clothesline helped you to visualize that process happening.